20% of men at the top on Tinder, Bumble, and Hinge are getting 83% of the right swipes. The bottom 80% of men on Tinder, Bumble, and Hinge are competing for 17% of women. All you do is lead with money. You're always going to have to lead with money. Don't lead by dangling the Lamborghini keys.
The discipline for making your bed translates to everything in your life.
It does.
And tell all my subscribers, where are the good women? Where are they located? Which city, what time, where?
I have 10 girls that I know that I'm friends with, and they're all naked in the hot tub with me. That's fucking fun.
I need to join you, Michael. I need to join you.
Yeah, you come out here. Hey, bikini competition. Oh, sorry. Here we go. What's going on?
Yes, guys, what's going on? Sham here from Be Real TV, and we are joined by Michael Sartain, all the way from Las Vegas, Nevada. Michael, thank you for joining the show. How are you doing today, brother?
Hey, man, I'm great, man. Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Excellent. So, Michael, first question to you is, how is it rolling in 30 women deep into a club?
So I used to be a captain in the Air Force, and I flew a KC-135. I was a navigator, and we had this thing called an elephant walk. And this is going to sound crazy, but what that meant is all the aircraft go onto the runway they taxi at the same time, and we all take off one after another. Then we fly in formation. We fly in formation. If I'm the lead navigator, all the other aircraft go off my lead. That's what it feels like. It's almost like a B-25 a bombardier pilot bomber back in World War II. That's what it feels like. When I walk in there, like the whole place stops and looks at what you're doing. And I know this is going to sound nuts, but if you look at some of the videos when I walk into a club with like 30, 40 girls, everything's orchestrated. The way the girls walk, everything's set up, where the camera guy sets, it looks natural. None of it's natural. All of it is played for media. And the reason why is that's what we teach in our program, is that if you have a choice between one of two things, one being the party and two being the photos and the videos of the party, the actual photos and the videos of the party are actually the thing that's more important. That's the thing that gets impressions. That's the thing that grows your brand. That's the thing that grows your business. And that's what we teach in Men of Action. So that's why we do that whole thing. But you ask how it feels. It's great. It really is fulfilling. It's awesome. Same thing with the bikini competitions. Same thing with the charity events. Same things when I go on stage and we raise money for children's charities. And I ask all the influencers to come up, and I got 30 girls up there with like 400 million Instagram followers. And they're just like, hey guys, donate to this charity. And next thing you know, we raise a couple $100,000. So all of it's great, man.
Do you find that men and women can just be friends?
Yeah. So this is a huge point of contention. So you imagine like one of the main purveyors that men and women can't be friends is Rollo Tomasi, who's like now one of my closest friends. And the main thing that, where we found to be the difference is what we're saying is being friends and friend zoned. Men should not be friend zoned by women. That's not what I'm saying. What men should do is, I've got a girlfriend, and then maybe your girlfriend, and maybe your girlfriend has a girlfriend, and then so you got that, and then afterwards there's like 70 or 80 other girls in your life, because in my situation, I host the two biggest bikini competitions in the world. I live in Las Vegas. Whenever I go out to a club, there's always like 30 or 40 girls that I know. I'm not going to try to sleep with all of them. What I'm going to do is, hey, Sally, can you bring 5 girls to this? Hey, Sarah, can you bring 10 girls to this? If you're a club promoter, guys and girls can be friends. If you're a club promoter, if you're a guy who manages a strip club, if you're a dude who worked as a VIP host, a bartender, or if you're like a male nurse, if you worked in some like a field where there's a ton of women, it's not one of these situations where like one time Dan Bilzerian told me this. He goes, if I had 16, I could all these women. Like it was just one of these situations where it's like you can't do this thing where you're surrounded by women all the time and just expect that every single one of them is going to be blow me or blow me out and like just show massive amounts of intent. So there's 3 reasons why you should be friends with women. 1, women introduce you to other women. 2, women give you access to other locations. And 3, being around beautiful women all the time calibrates you. So like if you ever had a dude who's like, he thinks he can't be friends with women, and you put him in front of like a girl who's a 10, he's going to blubber. He's going to like just sit there and talk a bunch of shit. He's going to blah, blah, blah. If you ever seen this, Sham, where you'll have a guy, he'll be like, yo, man, I'm going to go over there and talk to that girl. And then he goes and talks to the girl and he's like, yeah, hey, what's going on? You guys want to come over here and have a drink? His voice cracks, his voice changes. The reason why that happens is the autonomic nervous system causes his throat to close up, his vocal cords to constrict, his palms start sweating, his eyes start dilating. That doesn't happen if you're around beautiful women all the time. Now, here's the other part, the other caveat. 99% of men can't be friends with women they're attracted to. That's where Rollo and I agree. Where the difference is, if you're around beautiful women all the time, then you don't have a problem with this. But if you're not around beautiful women all the time, like for instance, you just did a 15-month deployment in Iraq or Afghanistan and you get back, that guy can't be friends with women. But a dude who manages, I don't know a single guy who manages a strip club who doesn't have female friends. Every single one of them. And the 2 girls, Bianca Gezi and Basha Didak, who those were the girls working for Ignite who were getting girls models to come to the Ignite parties for Dan Bilzerian. They were both his friends. He was not sleeping with them. They were just friends. They were girls who brought girls to his events. So there's this massive misunderstanding. You can be friends with a woman. You can't let a woman friend zone you. That's where the difference happens. I think that because we just use the word friend, it becomes very confusing. So one thing I do for a lot of red pill guys is I'll say the word acquaintance, or I'll say the word cohort or something like that, because they get their buttholes clinch up whenever you say a friend. Oh, I can't be friends with women. So I use different terminology so that they don't get upset about it. But yes, you definitely can be friends with women. That's not a problem. Even, by the way, even Donovan Sharp agrees with me. He said it. Even fucking Myron Gaines, the girls who manage the hoe wranglers that manage the girls at Fresh and Fit, they're his friends. He takes them to dinner every fucking night. Rollo has female friends. He calls them his sister wives, but they're his fucking female friends. He doesn't sleep with them. So that's the thing. All these guys have that same thing. They'll say that they don't because they're trying to make red pill content, but they do have female friends.
So I don't personally align. I try not to align myself with any in particular group, because what happens is when you align yourself with any particular philosophy too much and you associate yourself with that, you get indoctrinated by it. And everybody's like, join our group, join our group. And I don't think any group or any individual has the same thought process anyway, right? But onto this thing about, is what you're basically saying that you become desensitized to it when you're around so many beautiful women? And what does that do to your attraction level to women? Because it's kind of what's coming to my mind is when men watch pornography, you become desensitized. And what can happen is it can result into issues in the bedroom, because you're seeing so much. You're seeing another man with a woman on, on this porn site on your mobile consistently, and it's not just white women, it's black women, it's Chinese women, it's 21-year-olds, it's 30-year-olds, it's
almost like there's little tabs up at the top for all those different things you just said.
But you see, this is what's happened in the world, right? I imagine there's always been some form of pornography for a very long time, but what's happened is access to that pornography has become more readily available, up until the point where it went from magazines to TVs to computers to laptops to mobiles. And maybe I don't know, maybe Elon Musk is going to work on something to bring some chips into our brains and attach some pornography that way as well. But it's so readily available that you become desensitized to women. So do you find a similar component there when you're hanging around with so many women? That you become desensitized in a way?
So here's the main difference. So Dr. Andrew Huberman, he talks about this, about the dopamine reset that happens whenever people watch pornography. If you consistently watch pornography, your dopamine levels get up to this certain level when you're watching it, and then nothing else compares, and you're just set at that point. And then what happens is guys get into crazier and crazier pornography, and they need more of it to get the same result. Very similar to heroin, right? So to answer your question, no, because the dopamine spike doesn't happen just because you're around beautiful women. If you're around beautiful women that are your friends, it's not the same dopamine reset where you're at 10 of 10. Now, I enjoy, like, for instance, when I'm in Jamaica and I'm with...
Yes, guys, Sham here from Be Real TV. I am very sorry for interrupting your video. Just do me a quick favor. Click the subscribe button if you haven't done so already. And please go to the bell notification icon and set it to all. YouTube does not seem to want to pump my videos to my subscribers. I work very hard on this platform, and I would very much appreciate if you just did them two things to support me.
Like 10 girls that I know that I'm friends with, and they're all naked in the hot tub with me. That's fun, but it's not the same thing as having sex. It's not quite so I wouldn't compare the two things. The other thing is, while a man may be desensitized to attractive women, he's not desensitized to women in general, and he's not desensitized to sex. Meaning, like, if men would become desensitized to women by being around a lot of women, then porn wouldn't even be a thing. You would just watch so much porn and then stop. But as we know, it's an addiction that just keeps feeding itself and building on itself. So no, I haven't found that really to be an issue. The main thing that's happened to me is that, and this is going to sound really fucking cheesy, but when I see a beautiful woman, it's actually easier for me to see the other components of her life. Is she close to her family, her intellect, her agreeableness, her level of loyalty, all that kind of stuff is easier for me to see now, because when I was in my early 20s, all I saw was a girl was hot and I thought the girl was hot, and that's all I cared about. You know what I'm saying?
No, I understand. I understand where you're coming from. So, Michael, what about yourself? If you don't mind, could you tell us a little bit about what your relationship status is? Not asking for myself, right? Just asking generally. Yeah. What's your relationship status, and what's your thought process on having monogamous relationships?
So I'm currently in a relationship. I host, like I said, these two huge bikini competitions. One of them is in their finals is in Mexico. It's called Swimsuit USA's World Championship. And at the Swimsuit USA World Championship, I met a girl, Kylie, and then we started seeing each other. And then she eventually moved here, got serious, and now she lives with me now. As far as in general, I'm not going to talk about my specific relationship just because we're in Vegas. There's a lot of exceptions in our relationship. I will but as far as like traditional monogamy, I'll say this. It's difficult. I'm not going to give any prescriptions. I'm just going to talk about statistics. There's a book called The Intelligence Paradox by Satoshi Kanazawa, and he talks about as you move up the IQ scale, men are more likely to cheat. Women are actually more likely to cheat as well. So as you move up that scale, as far as the strata, as far as money or status or looks or intelligence goes, men are more likely to cheat. It doesn't mean that men should cheat. What it means, though, is as women, they go and they have these men that they reject. Those men that they reject generally can't cheat. That's why 33% of men report having 0 sexual partners over the last year. But those men at the very top, they have so many options, it's difficult for them to not cheat. Not difficult. Difficult is the wrong word. It's less likely that they won't cheat. It doesn't mean 100% of the time that they won't cheat. So what happens is as you move up the strata, what you're asking, the question you're asking, Sham, is for different strata of men, that answer is different. So I've said before, there's 3 genders. There's high status men, low status men, and women. Those are the 3 genders. Because high status men and low status men have nothing to do with each other, Sham. If you've ever seen guys who if you come up, you get in better shape, you start making a bunch of money, the guys you went to high school with, they seem like fucking foreign creatures to you. They seem like alien species to you because they don't have the same neurology. They don't have the same physiology. They don't have the same temperament. They don't have the same metabolic rate. They don't have the same number of sexual partners, and they don't have they don't make the same amount of money. And so for that high status man, it's harder to do monogamy now. The low status man, the thing is, he's not cheating. He doesn't have the ability to cheat. He's just creeping in girls' DMs and subscribing on OF. That's all he's got. And so that bifurcation, there used to be like a middle class for men, and that middle class is kind of gone. It's either dudes who are like doing really well. The top 20% of men on Tinder, Bumble, and Hinge get 83% of the right swipes. Let me say that one more time. For those of you who understand mathematics, 20% of men at the top on Tinder, Bumble, and Hinge are getting 83% of the right swipes, which means the bottom 80% of men on Tinder, Bumble, and Hinge are competing for 17% of women. This is incredibly imbalanced. And so because of that imbalance, monogamy has become more challenging for men at the top. And it's actually probably more challenging for women at the bottom, to be honest with you, because we see a lot of women becoming dissatisfied with the men that they're with, and then they move on to other men. That's been like a common thing. 80% or 70% of marriages are or 70% of divorces are initiated by women. So that's kind of the issue right there. But as far as like, there are things that you can do that might help it make it work. And one of them is the idea of polygyny, which is like the man and the woman date women together. A lot of women aren't cool with that. Some women are. But the idea of traditional monogamy, just what I've seen with a 53% divorce rate, 70% of divorces are initiated by women. It makes it so that it's not impossible, but it's difficult. And what I think is the excess stimulus is one of the reasons that makes it more difficult. Meaning, I think a man is less likely to cheat if he lives in Des Moines, Iowa, than if he lives in Bel Air, California. So that's another issue when it comes to that. I don't have a prescription though. I just know what the statistics tell us. 10% of men are getting 63% of the right swipes. Sham, think how crazy that number is. If you were to graph that out, how unbelievably ridiculous that is. That means you're going to have a dude that gets 6 dates, and then you're going to have 6 men competing for 1 woman at the bottom. That's how when you work this out, it just comes up to these crazily unequitable numbers.
But the reason for that is because in history, men have always gone out to war, men have always died in war, and then women had to protect their children from predators and other males, and then they would find themselves marrying other people. So this is a structure that we've created over thousands of years through evolution. Yeah. It's not something that's new. It's something that's been in us for a long time. And I believe that monogamous relationships between men and women is something that is a modern construct. I don't think this is an ancient construct. Traditionally, men and women have not been monogamous with one another.
Yeah. So Dr. David Buss came on my podcast, and he agreed with this explanation. Basically, Homo sapiens throughout their history have had a lifetime of polygyny or polygamy interspersed with short periods of monogamy. Meaning, a girl had a boyfriend when she was in junior high, then broke up with him, then another boyfriend in high school, then broke up with him, and then met a guy in college. And every time when she had the boyfriend, in her mind, there was a possibility that this was going to be her forever soulmate. So she didn't go into every relationship thinking I'm just going to fuck this guy and then move on and fuck another guy. She doesn't think that. In her mind, it's like, this is monogamy. But over the course of these different periods of monogamy, over the course of when you have, 7, 12, 15 different partners over that lifetime, you've basically that you have not had a monogamous life, but you've had little periods of monogamy interspersed in your life. And that's what Dr. Buss believes as well. Throughout history, that's generally how it works. Because here's the thing, Sham, from an evolutionary standpoint, it does not make sense for a man and a woman to meet each other like when they're very young, like after puberty, and just stay with each other forever, because there's so many other things that can happen. Men die in war, like you said before. There's so many things where like your partner can become hurt or overweight or fat, either female or male. You find out that the woman you're with can't have children. There has to be some adaptation for partners to be able to switch, because while that does not benefit the individual relationship, it does benefit the species as a whole. So yes, I definitely, that would be an adaptation. There has to be an adaptation for men and women to get together, to find attraction, to want to have sex so they can have children. But there also has to be an adaptation where if things go wrong, I can get out. Again, most women, when they're physically abused, eventually are going to get out of the relationship. And most men of status, when they get cheated on, are going to get out of the relationship. Men of low status, however, will not. Men of low status will tolerate a woman who's cheating. The likelihood of a man tolerating whether or not a woman is cheating, I can almost guarantee you, I haven't seen a graph on this, but I can promise you it's almost directly proportional to how much money he makes. I can guarantee you that's true. And the other thing is, like, as a man makes more money, this is another thing. The likelihood, they were going over like the likelihood of somebody being, having what's it called, cuckolded, basically raising someone else's children. When they went into like the lowest 20th percentile, by the way, this data has not been verified fully, but like it's something close to this if you wanted to verify it. When they went into like the lowest 20 percentile of men, it was like something like 11% chance they were raising someone else's child. When they got up to the highest 2% earners, because they were looking at like the genetics, like matching up the father to the son, it was like less than 1%. The higher the likelihood, or the more money the man made, the less likely he was raising someone else's child.
My take is this. Let me tell you my true opinion on this. My opinion is, right, do you know, there's not a one shoe fits all approach for everybody.
Of course, yeah.
When you have society, you do not have a group of men who are, the large proportion of society are not wealthy. The large proportion of society are your average Joblos, right, who are not making a lot of money, and a lot of them aren't in shape. And that goes for both men and women. So if you start going on this red pill vibe of, I suppose, having multiple women and trying to achieve, the heights of success, what people like, such as Andrew Tate have done. But
sure.
You don't achieve that, but you have that mindset that I want multiple women. Do you think that's dangerous for society and people, men who are not in shape and who are a little bit deluded with themselves?
I think anyone in any deluded situation is bad. So like a woman who like clearly has accomplished a lot in her life, but isn't that physically attractive, calling herself a 10, that's a little bit delusional. I've seen several instances of that. A man who thinks that, like, again, you've seen this probably before. A guy has a girlfriend, they break up, she moves on to another person, but he still thinks that's his girlfriend. Like, you see delusion like that. There's anybody who has any kind of delusion, it's bad. Not just men, not just women. But in this particular case, what you're talking about is a man wanting multiple women, but not having the ability to get them. Here's the situation with that. I think what the red pill actually prescribes, and I'm not speaking for red pill because I'm red pill adjacent, I'm not actually red pill, but what it prescribes is you should have the attributes to be able to attract multiple women. Not necessarily that you need to be with multiple women. The concept of spinning plates does not necessarily include sex. Now, for me, I will tell you, in my 20s, I definitely spun a lot of plates and had sex with a lot of women, probably more than I should have. I used to manage a strip club between the ages of 22 to 26. So in that period, was that something where I gained a lot of experience? Yes. And was I able to date multiple women? Yes, I was. But for other dudes, what was happening though, what probably the best prescription is the idea of, should I be in better shape or worse shape? Well, being in better shape is going to make me more attractive to women in general, not just my type of women, but just women in general. Should I be smarter or dumber? Should I be more eloquent or less eloquent? Should I be more charismatic or less charismatic? Should I make more money or should I make less money? Should I fix my teeth or have fucked up teeth? Should I have a relevant haircut or an irrelevant haircut? Should I wear suits that actually fit me properly or not fit me properly? Should I understand my style? These different things that basically, they all lead in the same direction. A man who dresses well, has good teeth, has good breath, speaks well, is funny, highly educated, highly educated and what was the word? And makes a lot of money. those things are in generally attractive to more women. And I think that's the prescription of the red pill, more than this idea of just like having sex with as many women as possible. And to be fair, in the case of Sneeko and Anthony and Andrew Tate, both of them have converted to Islam in the last 2 years, and their whole belief about what I'm looking for is hedonism, the hedonistic beliefs. They've gone away from it. Andrew was not like that before, and he sort of changed. And you see the same thing with Sneeko. Sneeko was actually like chastising me when we did our debate. He's like, "Don't you feel like this is just empty hedonism?" And my retort to that was, I agree that it's empty hedonism, but when a man's in his early 20s and he just doesn't have experience with women, he doesn't really care. And I don't know, Sham, you probably had the same experience. There's a period in your life when you're younger and you're just like, you don't really care about whether or not she's a Republican or a Democrat, whether or not she's a Tory or a part of the Labor Party. She just has big boobs and you're down to get it. And so that's what happens when you're in your early 20s. And then later on in life, when you're looking for the mother of your children and you've been with multiple women, you're like, that girl is hot as shit, but she keeps talking about her ex. Red flag. Oh, that girl is hot as shit, but she keeps making excuses for why she can't take, like she keeps posting this kind of content, or she keeps making excuses why her phone keeps dying, or she keeps making excuses why she keeps hanging out with this friend, or she keeps making excuses why her ex-boyfriend won't stop calling her. And you're like, I have experience here. I've spun plates. I have experience with these women. I see these red flags, and so that I avoid this type of content, or I avoid this type of woman. Instead of what generally happens is I see big boobs, I see blue eyes, my penis gets hard, and I will do anything she says, which is this is 99% of men fall in that category. And the reason why is because they don't have experience with women. So that's why I think experience with women is important. I don't think hedonism is necessarily important.
So I'll tell you my take on this. When I first came across this topic, it was actually Richard Cooper that I started watching that brought me onto this. And I watched quite a bit of Richard Cooper, and I went into that whole world of Red Pill. And I went through a moment where I was very deeply embedded in Red Pill, and then I came out of it, and then I was back in it. And I had a sort of love and hate relationship with the Red Pill. But over time, I've come to a conclusion of, I believe that over time, men and women, we both carry baggage mentally. And there is something in Christianity. I'm a Muslim, but there's something called soul transferring in Christianity, which talks about the transference of when you sleep with a person, you keep a piece of that person's soul. And now there's also some scientific evidence that when you have multiple partners, it does have obviously a psychological impact on you, and you carry baggage from them relationships. Now, it's also statistically proven that women struggle to get over the baggage and the problems at first, but in the long run, women heal fully and better from
breakups,
relationships with
from breakups.
But men still hang on to them previous relationships which they've had and have had their heart broken. So them scars and that emotional baggage lasts with both sexes, but it lasts in different ways. Now, I believe though that, having said that, I think that women carry the damage in a different way. And what I mean by that is, in society, if people find out, and this is just the way that our society is, right? Across the world. And I think in the West, you're obviously in the US, I'm in the UK. In the West, it's a bit more relaxed, it's a bit more liberal. But if you go to the vast majority of countries across the world, they're not as liberal, right? And it just, that fact remains that when women have multiple partners, it knocks their value in society. That's just a fact that remains. And then that also takes a toll on them, because the relationships that they're going to curate after that are not going to be of high value, which brings me on to the next topic. As men and women age, men can age differently. Now, I came across multiple men. I'm in my early 30s, but I came across multiple men, especially after reading the Red Pill, because you like when you're looking for if you say, for example, you're thinking of buying a Porsche, you're going to see a Porsche everywhere, right? So when I started looking into the Red Pill community, and I started looking at this stuff to do with, as you get older, men's value can increase because you could take testosterone, so on and so forth. And I started seeing and noticing this, that there were many men in their 40s and their 50s who were on testosterone, TRT, and I know you're an advocate for TRT, I've heard. And they can be in shape, they can still maintain, they've got their money in check, they can maintain their body, they've got the mindset, and then they date younger women. But one of the issues with that comes back to this element that I was talking about soul transfer and the emotional baggage. Now, them men as well have emotional baggage for them to not be in a monogamous relationship usually. And I find that a lot of guys who are successful and rich, I have actually noticed this personally. Maybe it's a perception of mine, but there was always a woman many years ago who broke their heart, and that led them onto this journey and onto this path of success and that drive to become a hyper successful person. I've noticed it with several people.
Yeah, I think if you find anyone who has some kind of hyper drive, one of my favorites is David Goggins. If you've ever read his books, he talks about his abusive father, Trunis Goggins, the guy who would beat the shit out of him.
Some trauma in their past has caused them to be so hyper.
Yeah, when you listen to him, it feels like one of the things he's doing whenever he's like performing, becoming a Navy SEAL, he was a TAC-P in the Air Force, and I believe he went to Ranger School also. Whenever he's doing these things and he's running these ultra marathons, there's a part of him that's like afraid to go back to that point where he was helpless and he was being abused by his father. So could the same thing happen? I will tell you, for me, yeah, I got made fun of like by girls. Did I have my heart broken? I don't know that I had my heart broken when I was younger. What I did feel when I was younger was not included. I felt, because I was a very awkward kid, I felt like Steve Urkel, right? I was just made fun of all the time. Like I was a nerdy kid. And so from that standpoint, I was like, man, I wanted to fit in. I wanted to do so. So I worked on different parts of my life in order to do that. But I promise you, if you went back and saw anyone who's like hyper successful, you're going to find some sort of story that they came up with. And by the way, that's another adaptation to human beings. The ability to overcome is the reason why there's 8 billion humans on this planet and there's only 400,000 elephants. We won. We're a robust species. When we lose a limb, when we lose an eye, when we lose a parent, whatever, the species continues to propagate. People survive and they move on. People are generally pretty durable. As a species, we're pretty durable. Now, individually, over the last 10 years, no, we've not been very durable. We get very angry whenever people come on our campuses and say things we don't like. We report people on social media with anonymous accounts when people say things we don't like. We've become very much Tekashi 6ix9ine. We've become very much like Machine Gun Kelly wearing a pink dress, like that kind of thing. Society's definitely got softer as we've gotten further and further away from the survival scenario. But just in general, we're a robust, tough species that has the ability to just get through almost everything. And because of that, that's where success comes from. If you ever read Jeff Bezos' book, or if you ever read about Steve Jobs, remember Steve Jobs, his parents just abandoned him, right? Yeah. And then here's the funny thing, because we talk about genetics a lot in my program. Steve Jobs, his parents abandoned him. He goes and lives with this middle-class couple. Obviously, he has an insanely high IQ. He finally meets his parents, and both of them have a PhD. How about that? Intelligence is heritable. That's a very offensive thing to a lot of people, but it definitely is.
That's really interesting, because sorry to cut you off. I always thought that, but I didn't actually know that till you mentioned it. It was something I subconsciously always thought, that you can inherit intelligence, but I wasn't sure of it.
It's not offensive if you found out that my mother's Colombian and that's why my skin is brown. It's not offensive if you find out that I'm 6'2" and my dad was 6'2". Those things make sense to people. My eyes are brown because my dad's eyes were brown. Those things make sense to people. But if you say this person's intelligent because his parents were intelligent, when you have two intelligent parents that have an intelligent kid, they're like, yeah, that sounds great. When you have two dumb parents that have a dumb kid, they're like, no, it was because of the school system. No, my kid is dumb because you guys are bullying him. No, your kid is dumb because intelligence is heritable. Your kid is dumb because you decided to marry the dumbest, hottest girl you could possibly find. That's why your kids are dumb. And that a lot of people have a hard time with that. And so that's one of the things. There's a few books on this, but The Intelligence Paradox by Satoshi Kanazawa is probably the best one that I've ever read, specifically dealing with this subject. Yeah, man, it is. Going back to your point, though, you were saying about soul transfer. I don't know anything about the soul transfer thing, but what I do know is this: as far as the studies you're talking about, it seems to affect women a lot more than men. What you're talking about, though, is individual breakups for men and men not getting over breakups as well. That is, there's a really, really a devious past behind that whole concept. There's a book called The Murderer Next Door by Dr. David Buss. And he goes over men being broken up with, women finding new lovers, and men then committing acts of murder because of it. And the reasons why that happens, men do have that, like pride killings or killings over women. He makes some postulations that the majority of murders throughout history have been men killing other men over women. When you go back and look at Genghis Khan, like again, 8% of, I believe, Asian males in the world right now have his Y chromosome. Like men are killing other men over women. That's essentially what happens. If you go all the way back to the Bible, when God tells the Israelites to kill the Jezebites, to kill the Canaanites, and to kill the Malachites. He says, kill the men and then steal the virgins. Steal the virgins. That's what it says in the Bible. So like when you go see those things, you kind of come to this understanding that like all of this has to do with men trying to be jealous and trying to procure as many virginic women as they possibly can. And so that's where some of that comes from. But overall in society, though, I think we're talking about men who are getting dumped. Men who have multiple partners, I think it's a little different. When I see men that have multiple partners, what I see is a man who realizes that he has options with women. And here's where the rub is, right? Because I want to sign, a big free agent soccer player, a big free agent. My club wants to sign a big free agent basketball player, right? Everyone wants to sign LeBron. I want to sign LeBron, but that means all the other teams want to sign LeBron, so his value goes up and he gets a max contract. It was the same kind of situation with a man who's of high status. Because you as a woman find him attractive, the thing you have to understand is that other women also find him attractive. And so that makes it more difficult either to procure him, to get him to settle down, and to get him to be faithful. And so that's essentially where that happens. I don't necessarily think that, remember I said before, high status men, low status men and women. I think high status men can have multiple partners and it doesn't necessarily cause them to have a ton of baggage. I think low status men who get dumped or cheated on, they do carry that baggage with them.
Let me tell you. So there's one of the main components, because there's different components as to what's considered a high value man. Mm-hmm. In my opinion, there are two components which are the top of the tree. The first one, I believe, is the way a guy looks. I think regardless of what anybody says, the physical appearance of a man, his height, his physical being, his muscles, his body fat, that makes a difference, and obviously his facial structure. The way a person appears overall will determine whether he can attract. Because this is why often in society, right, regardless of money, you see 8s with 8s, 9s with 9s, 10s with 10s quite often. Mm-hmm. Now, if they are competing against...
Not here in Vegas. Not here in Vegas. Not here in Vegas. You see rich with 10s. you see rich with 10s and rich with 9s and rich with... It's a little different here, but yeah, I agree with you.
Understandable.
Same thing in the Emirates. Same thing in the Emirates. Yeah.
Which brings me on to the second point, which is your financial status. Now, I know somebody who is not financially well off, but he's a very good-looking guy, and he has had an insane amount of women. I'm not going to mention him by name, but he has had an insane amount of women.
Sure.
But the impact it's had on him has been very negative. The reason being is because he is so obsessed with the women, because he has so many women in his life. He is absolutely being choked by the women. So he can't focus on his career. He can't focus on anything else because there are so many women coming to him. And what that's done to him is led his life down a path of obsession with women, but he hasn't gained any success in any other areas in his life. So it's become toxic for him. So I believe that sometimes there is a beauty to not being able to get so many women. I'm not talking for myself, I'm saying generally, right? I think sometimes it can be a curse. I remember when I was younger, it was definitely a distraction for me. And I feel like had I been more focused when I was younger, had I not been so astray per se, I would have been able to focus on my mission and my purpose and chasing excellence, which is the goal of what I think a young man should be. Now, in today's day and age, we do have, regardless of what people say about social media, today's day and age, we do have the likes of Andrew Tate giving advice. We do have the Richard Coopers of the world. We have Roland Tomasi. We have me and you giving advice to the youngsters here and now, right, who are listening to this podcast. But in my day, we didn't have them role models because we didn't have the internet like that. So the role models that I had were just simply the people around us. So we weren't aware of this stuff. We were aware of this red pill stuff. And, who used to read books back in them days out of we were busy. If you were reading books in them days, there was a problem. You weren't getting, when you're 18, 19, 20, you're that age, especially in that era, you're jumping around with girls and you're messing about. Usually that's what a lot of guys are doing at that age, if you can get it. But then, like I said, that distracts you from your purpose. Do you agree with that?
Yeah. So let's actually go back to the sociological thing that you just described before. So we had a period of time where I'm 45 years old. So let's just go through the 80s and the 90s. And during that time period, what happened was there tended to be a more liberal agenda. I'm not going to call it a woke narrative because we aren't at a woke. In the 1980s, that's not a woke narrative. That's something, it's just a bit of a liberal agenda. There's a liberal agenda to where Disney and these other places they're telling us slightly to be masculine is not really a good thing. It's kind of better to be a little bit more sensitive. And I think red pill is sort of a response to that, if that makes any sense. It's like we weren't reading books, and we didn't have a lot of guidance from the media telling us which way we should go. So instead, what we saw were Disney movies. We saw things like Cinderella, which is basically a story about a guy who's a simp, right? We saw shows like Hitch, which is basically teaching men to obsess over one woman. We saw stuff like that over time that just gave us bad example after bad example. And I feel like the red pill was sort of a manifestation, sort of a counterbalance to that, pushing us to a more sensitive, weaker narrative where masculinity isn't necessarily rewarded. And so this other narrative came up. And I do think that this narrative goes too far in the other direction. Sometimes I feel like it does. But your original question was, what was the first part?
It was just about, does it distract you from your purpose and your mission?
Yeah. Oh, so great. Okay. The trope about here in Vegas, there's a bunch of male strippers. We have more male strippers here than probably any other city in the country, right? Because the guys here actually make money. So I go out to clubs sometimes and I'll be hanging out, and there'll be some guy who's like a 6'3" Australian named Brock, who's just so fucking good looking. And this guy like literally has no time to pay his bills, to pay his taxes, because so many women want to sleep with him.
Exactly.
He goes to work. Women are trying to sleep with him. He gets off work. Women are trying to sleep with him. After the Thunder from Down Under shows, there's a bar outside, and all the guys from Thunder from Down Under go and they mingle with the women, and often they end up sleeping with the girls that are there after the show. These guys but here's the other thing. I talk to some of these guys, and they're often broke. They're often sleeping on someone's couch. They're often dating a woman who's older, who makes a lot more money than them. That's very frequently the case. So what I would do is that, Sham, I know you said you keep up with a lot of sports, but there's a video game called FIFA, right? There's a FIFA, there's Madden, there's all these different video games. And in the video games, the players have attributes: speed, awareness, accuracy, whatever the thing is, right? Endurance. They have all these different sliders. What happens is this guy's women's slider went up to a 10, but his money slider is at like a 1. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah,
and so what I tell guys to do is, I would, when you're in college and you're not really worried that much about money, get the woman slider up to a 3. But if the woman slider gets up to a 7 and the money slider's at a 1, which often happens in your early 20s, work on the money slider for a while. Let the money slider catch up. Get them both to a 7. And then here's the thing: when the money slider gets up to a 10, then the woman slider doesn't really. It kind of takes care of itself, because the attributes. This is one main difference between men and women. The things that make us successful also make us attractive. Let me say that one more time. The things as men that make us successful also make us attractive. I am in good shape. Okay. I have a physique, a 1.65 to 1 shoulder to waist ratio, which is what it's actually the Royal. It's a UK study that shows this, that women prefer that shoulder to waist ratio.
Have you got that shoulder to waist ratio, Michael?
Oh, I have no idea. I'm just trying to get as small as I can in my waist, and I actually have pretty narrow shoulders and a big hips because I'm Colombian. Like a lot of South American men, and we have these soccer hips. So the shoulder to waist ratio, my money's right. My speaking voice is right. The way I present myself is right. Now, here's another thing. My social media presents an image that I want to present, that I'm successful, that I'm social, that I can network, and that I'm a good speaker, all these things. So these are the things that make me look successful, Sham. But they're also the things that make me attractive to women, right? These things coincide. For women, it's different. I love the example of like Madame Curie, who discovered radium and the idea of radioactivity. And she ended up dying of radioactivity. While this woman, I believe she won a Nobel Prize for this, she also died of cancer. My point is, her discovering radium did not make her husband's penis harder. What made her successful and what made her attractive are two different things. So for men, what makes you successful, what makes you attractive are the same thing. For women, what makes them successful and what makes them attractive are two different things, with one exception. Obviously, if you're a model, then what makes you successful and what makes you attractive are the same thing. But other than that, if a woman is a doctor or a nurse, if the woman is an archaeologist or attorney, the things that make them successful are not necessarily the things that make them attractive to most men. Now, there are a few men that are like, she's an archaeologist, I'm an archaeologist, so it works together. I know Richard Reeves is a PhD. He was an assistant to the deputy director of the UK. He's at the Brookings Institute. He came on my show, and he's a PhD, and he's married to a PhD. Same thing with Neil deGrasse Tyson. He's a PhD in astrophysics, and he's married to a woman who has a PhD in theoretical mathematics, I believe, or something like that. But she's also physically attractive. For men, generally, the things that we find attractive are going to be signs of youth, facial symmetry, agreeableness, like for a certain level of whatever the word you want to look for, low body count, those kind of things, and loyalty, and then the ability to pull in the same direction of us. I generally don't pick women based on their book list or whether or not they're Republican or Democrat. I generally pick women based on like how well they can deal with me in a social situation and how physically attracted I am to them. Because as men, we know physical attractiveness is just way more important to us than it is to women. So when you see those kind of things, it's just a really important delineation. And this is where, you've seen these shows, whatever podcast, the show that I do with Rollo, Just Pearly Things, Fresh and Fit. Obviously, they're the ones who started this whole thing. Whenever you see any of those shows, you'll notice this is the ultimate place where women and men sort of diverge. Men talk about the things that make them successful and also make them attractive, and women mistakenly feel the same way because they listen to Cardi B and Megan Thee Stallion talking about being a bad bitch. But they don't understand that those things that make them successful and get them all this money don't make men attracted to them. The fact that you have a $70,000 Birkin when I meet a woman just makes me think initially, and I hate that I'm like this, but I'm like this, and most men are like this, that some dude bought that fucking thing for you, and the dude who bought it for you had sex with you in order to get you the $70,000 Himalaya Birkin, and he took you to Dubai, or he took you to wherever. And like whenever we see women in Tulum, when we see women on a yacht, when we see women flying private, in general, as men, we look at that and we say, yeah, some dude bought that for you. You can almost see the guy in your head, like he's fat and he's like a sugar daddy and he's just kind of like creepy and he's cheating on his wife and he's like paying you for sex. So whenever we see the trip to Tulum, the trip to Ibiza, this trip to Saint-Tropez, the trip to Dubai, whenever we see the private yacht and whenever we see the private jet, that's immediately what men think. And women are like, yes, I got the bag. Look at me traveling. Look how well traveled I am. Don't realize that men don't find that attractive. They're very confused about that. Very confused.
So,
go ahead.
Sorry, Michael. So let's go back a little bit, right? So, earlier I was mentioning to you about the large majority of the population. So a lot of the viewers, right, of this podcast who will be viewing this are not going to be multimillionaires. They might be in decent shape. They might be decent looking. And that's going to be the vast majority of men. Now, when you've got them men and they're looking at this podcast and they're seeing the talk taking place here in the Red Pill community and these just different talk shows that you're talking about. The goal here seems to be to get with as many women as you possibly can and attract a large proportion of women. But what if that's not what guys want? What if a particular guy wants to have a stable relationship, to be with a woman who is going to stay with him through thick and thin and ride the wave of life? And because I do know that there are a lot of guys like this.
Yeah.
Okay, well, my personal perception is not relevant here. What I'm talking about is the vast majority of guys, well, that I know, and a lot of people, some of them, depending on the age, will want a plethora of women. But then you have another proportion of guys who maybe they're a bit older, they want to settle down and they want that companionship, because I do believe there is a certain beauty, and it is a beautiful thing to have a long-lasting relationship, and there is a beauty to watching an old man with an old woman holding hands, walking down with the rainbow across them. That is a very beautiful thing. Now, when you're a high status man, which is what the red pill community, and I'm not against the red pill community, I've learned a lot from the red pill community, but what I'm saying is when they're preaching about, let's say, for example, keeping in shape, which is obviously a good thing, you should do that, accumulating wealth and chasing success, I believe in that as well. But are these things not going to attract a woman on a very shallow level? Because I know you've also mentioned about social media, right? And attracting women on social media or attracting them through friendship circles, and that's how normally it should go. Because if you go up to people on the street and you're in shape, you're 6 foot plus tall, you're built like a tank, you've got a Lamborghini key here, and they get with you, they're getting with you for a very shallow purpose. Whereas if you meet somebody, all right, let's say, for example, you're going through a period in life where you're in decent shape, you're not in fantastic shape, you're in decent shape, you've got your stuff together, you're not a millionaire, but you've got a good job, and you've got stability in your life, and a woman gets with a person like that. Them two types of people, the two types of guys, one guy is going to attract a lot of gold diggers and a lot of the wrong type of women in his life, which are not going to last and ride the waves with him, And then the other type of person who's got some stability, is in decent shape, and he's got his stuff together. I'm not saying he's a low value guy. What I'm saying is he is not a multimillionaire. He's not the most ripped and best shape, but he's got his shit together. And just by having his shit together, he attracts somebody who's going to stay with him for the rest of his life. Because let's be honest, At the same time, a woman is not going to want to get with a guy who's living in his mother's basement, right?
Mm-hmm.
She's not going to want to get with a guy who is obese and out of shape unless there is something coherently wrong with her. So my question here is around, is there a balance that you need to get here?
Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to use another soccer example. When Lionel Messi or Cristiano Ronaldo, they get really, really good at their sport. They don't get good. Like Cristiano Ronaldo didn't get good at soccer to play for, just to be good for Lisbon or good for Real Madrid or good for whatever team he plays for. And Lionel Messi didn't get good. I recently found out he signed with Miami yesterday. He's going to play here in the U.S. These guys don't get good to play for a certain soccer team. LeBron James didn't get good at basketball to be good at basketball to play for the Mavericks or the Lakers or whoever. He just got good at basketball, right? Lionel Messi didn't get good at soccer to play for a certain team. He got good at soccer in general. For men, just follow me with this example. I don't need you to get good to attract a certain type of women. I just need you to be attractive in general. Because what happens is when you do this whole thing where you're just trying to attract a certain type of woman, you're narrowing the amount of women in total that you're able to attract. And so the idea that what you're saying before, this concept of like, well, she gets with you for this reason and you're going to attract a certain type of woman. There's a certain type of woman that is a gold digger, but that doesn't necessarily mean that's the only thing she's going to be. Now, women who are gold diggers are gold diggers. But my point is, Sham, you see this all the time with guys. They'll meet a girl and they'll be like, I'm just interested in having sex with her. And then he gets to know her and finds out, okay, there's other things that I'm attracted to about her. Same thing with women. Women may find a guy and be like, hey, I'm only attracted to this guy because he's tall and good looking. And there may be other reasons why he's attracted to him. The problem with the real issue, Sham, is if you're a dude who constantly leads with money, if all you do is lead with money, you're always going to have to lead with money. And so the trick is don't lead with money. Don't lead by dangling the Lamborghini keys. Lead by like not qualifying yourself. If you're able to do that, then it's not as big of a problem. So my advice to men is become attracted to all women. You do the things that generally make you attractive, meaning having more money than less, being in better shape than in worse shape, reading more books than fewer books, having a more successful, scalable business instead of a less successful, scalable business. Worry about being attracted to all people, all women, instead of just being attracted to a certain type of woman. And then from that, what happens is because you have discernment and experience, you're able to then see the red flags and then pick the one you want. I think it's unrealistic, this idea. We have a show here in the United States called The Big Bang Theory, and the main characters that end up together at the end of the show, they happen to be next door neighbors. That's not real life. The girl of your dreams is not going to move in next door. You're going to have to find her through different mechanisms. The easiest one is going to be through the internet. You're going to be able to come into contact with that person. So it's really important that you understand that you need to, number one, grow the pie, and number one, be as attractive as you can. And then from that point, it's almost like job interviews. Like you get to meet all these women and you're like, this one works, this one doesn't, this one works, this one doesn't. And then finally you're able to pick someone out of that whole thing. That's my personal take on it, is that you, because of the experience that you have, it because of the number of women that you get to choose from, you're able to pick a better partner that way.
I want to go on to something here just on the back of that. You mentioned something very interesting, Michael, about going up to women, because you get dating experts now, right, who will teach you. And there's one specific one which I watched was Corey Wayne. I don't know if you've heard of him, Coach Corey Wayne. He's very popular on YouTube and he's a dating expert. And he teaches you a lot of good stuff. And he has helped me immensely. He's helped my speech. He's helped my confidence. And I practiced a lot of what he preached. But I noticed something, and I didn't realize this when I was listening to him, but I noticed it at the end. His advice does help you in all aspects of life, whether it's talking to men or women. However, if you are going to go up to a woman on the street and you're going to say, I love that tattoo on you, or I like them shoes, and she's going to speak to you and you're going to use your tactics, your finesse, your vocabulary, you're going to have a nice, well-fitted t-shirt on, you're smelling good, you're speaking well, you use all the correct tactics to get her phone number, and then you finesse her. If you do that and you are able to finesse her, is that woman really going to be the value of a woman that should last with you throughout the rest of your life? The chances are no, because if you were able to do that, then another guy is able to do that.
Sure.
And this is the thing, Michael, what you spoke about, which was I found very interesting. If you want to find a real quality woman, the chances are that you are going to find her within a network or a circle in and around you, because that woman, for her to get with you, there should be an element of nervousness from her. She should, if she's not nervous about getting with you and she's going to get with you as a complete stranger, and the quicker she gets with you, I'm not saying, like I said, every situation is different and there's never a one shoe fits all, and there are specific examples which we can talk about, but they are outliers. Generically and generally speaking across the board, right, a woman should be nervous to get with you, because if she's very confident, what does that mean? Well, obviously that's a red flag. If a woman is overly confident with you and she wants to get with you very quickly and she has full confidence to go in the car with you and go wherever, like I said, I'm not generalizing across the board. There are examples which are outliers, but generally speaking, it's a red flag because she will have done that with other guys.
So I'll talk about it in my situation. So I met my girlfriend in person. Like, some friends of mine introduced me to her because we were at a pageant together. But it was social media that got me access. So it's a combination of both things, right? The social media access that I get from all the people that I know from social media, they get me access to certain circles. And when I'm in those circles, then I get to meet. So the charity events that I go to, or some of the pageants that I go to, or some of the galas that I go to, or some of the conventions that I go to, I get access to those people based on my social media. And then once I'm in that area, then I'm introduced to people face to face that way. So it is a combination of both things. As far as like finding a good woman or bad woman, again, the whole thing I'm going to tell you is that, like, this idea that you're just going to, well, no, the good girls are at church. No, they're not. They're not at church. A lot of the church, what the church is doing now, at least the Christian church, a lot of them.
Michael, where are the good women? Tell me the secret.
Okay, hold on,
tell all my subscribers the secret. Where are the good women? Where are they located? Which city? What time? Where?
Exactly. Wouldn't that be great if we could do that? No, the thing is, one of the things that you're going to find is that I think they're normally distributed to where you're going to find them in all different places, but it's going to be a little harder to find them in, like, say, West Hollywood compared to Frog Level, Arkansas, which is where my girlfriend's from, right? One of the things that you're going to see is that with these women is as long as you have what I said before, access to women that are attractive, that you find attractive on a regular basis, and you just see, okay, let's try it this way. If I'm trying to hire people for a job, I want more applicants, and then I got to start to see the applicants in comparison to each other so that I can hire the best applicant. When I'm trying to go do door-to-door sales, again, the trick is I just have to go and do more and more sales. I tell men this idea that there's just the girl of your dreams is going to move in next door is not realistic. Also, the thing with the church, I brought this up before. Pearl brought this up on my show, and I totally agree. What the church is doing is basically they're guaranteeing absolution to women who've, like, had sex with a lot of men, maybe been drug addicts, stuff like that. Like, come back to the church, and then we're going to stamp this thing on you called born again virgin. And then in the church, we have a bunch of men that we told these men to maintain their virginity until they're married. So they have no experience. So we're going to stick this born again virgin with these simp men that have no experience. And we're going to pair them up. If you go to youth groups right now, you're going to see this often. This girl who's just like, she's been with like 40 or 50 dudes. And this guy who's like never been with anyone. And he doesn't know better because the church is telling him to forgive. And so this is the matchup that's happening. And so this belief was like, no, the good girls are in the church. They're not in the church. The good girls are where the good girls are. They have different jobs. They have all kinds of stuff. Here's a funny thing. I know the receptionist, the girl who's the female receptionist who goes to church, and she's just like down to sleep with anyone. And I also know the girl who's on OnlyFans and has only had sex with her husband. So she's only had sex with one person, but the girl who's the receptionist has had sex with like 50. There's no one way to correlate these are the good women and these are the bad women. The way I would do it, one more time, is I would have plenty of experience with a lot of women, not necessarily having sex with all of them, but then having some sort of funnel in your life, for lack of a better term, whether it be your social life, your social circle, your social media, the events that you go to, whatever, so that you can meet lots of women and then you can discern this one's a keeper, this one's no good, this one's a keeper, this one's no good. That's the best you can do. And in the interim, the other thing I'll tell you guys is just have fun. Like, grow your wealth, grow your physique. On the way, have women pursue you. I agree with you, Sham. If you're going to be in a relationship, she needs to be slightly more interested in you than you are in her, because if she's not, when women have power in the relationships, it just tends to not end up very well. Like, the happiest relationships I've seen, this is not 100% of the time, the happiest relationships I've seen is where a man leads and a woman follows. They're both partners in the relationship, but you can't do that if you like her more than she likes you, and she always feels like she has the ability to lead.
So, on the last podcast with Richard Cooper, I asked him the question, I pushed back on Rich about what does a woman do who slept with a bunch of men and she wants to settle down? And Richard Cooper's response was, just because she's saying that she's got right with God doesn't make it so. And I think that this is a sort of facade which I think a lot of people use, where because it's a get out clause, right? You can do what you want, and then you say I get right with God, and then and what you're basically doing by doing that is, I do believe there is an element that it is between you and God, but there is also a second component. The person that gets with you, they're gonna have to deal with all that emotional baggage. They're gonna have to deal with all and like I said to you about soul transfers, I do believe in that. I do believe that the more people you sleep with, you carry some of that. And if it's just at a mental level, you are carrying that emotional baggage, and that person that marries that person has to deal with that. But where I kind of go with this, where I differ from the red pill is, I believe that they don't press enough. And Richard Cooper did say that men do carry emotional baggage, but Rich said they deal with it better. But how much better do men really deal with it? And from some of the statistics that I looked at, they actually don't deal with it. I know we already spoke about this, right?
Yeah.
And we spoke about this earlier. But the fact of the matter is, the more women that men get with as well, it will impact them at some point. Now, it impacts everybody differently, but I still think it leaves an impact. Now, I do believe there is a soft spot. I think what you're saying, it makes sense, right? You should, if you don't speak to women and then all of a sudden you're presented with a beautiful woman, you're not gonna be able to know how to deal with her. You're not going to be stoic in your approach. You're not going to be calculated. You're not going to be able to be a James Bond type gentleman with her. You're not going to have the skill set to be able to last that relationship through the long haul. And that's one of the issues that you face there. And I do believe experience plays a key role. Now, I'm a Muslim, okay? Now, a lot of people in the Islamic world, they don't often look at the philosophers that have come in the Islamic world, because after the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, there were several philosophers. One of the philosophers, he was a polymath, was called Al-Ghazali. And he talks about the components that make a good woman. And one of the components that he mentioned was about being a virgin, which I found very, very highly interesting that he mentioned that. Because a lot of Muslims, they don't look at the overall hemisphere of Islam. They don't look at the total package of it. And he was one of the greatest philosophers that ever lived. And he did talk about the importance of marrying a virgin. How important do you think virginity is when selecting a woman?
It's an interesting question. I can't really prescribe this. I think it's becoming less and less realistic over time, I think, to find a woman who's a virgin in Western society. If that's a complaint, then I kind of agree with that. I think it's becoming very difficult. I think there's certain societies where you can, but I think like if you live in Washington, D.C. or New York City and you're just going to find a girl who's a virgin, I think it's kind of difficult unless it's like some kind of arranged marriage. What I will say is this, the 37 culture study done by Dr. David Buss, they discuss with all 37 cultures, do men care more about a woman's body count or do women care more about a body count? And of course, the answer is we know anecdotally, and that's the data which shows that men definitely care more about a woman's body count. Women actually thought it was strange when a man was a virgin into his mid 20s, early 30s. That seemed odd to them. There was in Norway, they didn't care about virginity at all. In China, virginity was extremely important to them. But that whole view about virginity in China is also loosened up as well. As we become is there a correct answer? I don't know what the correct answer is. I can't prescribe it. I can't really tell you how many women that I thought that were attractive and not emotionally stunted that weren't a virgin. I've met women before that were virgins, but they tend to be like, I met one the other day and she's completely autistic. I remember she was very pretty. You guys know she's the girl on whatever podcast. She's on there all the time, and she's the one who dresses up like Jason Bateman. She dresses up in cosplay. That girl's autistic. She's severely autistic, and she's like, "I'm a virgin." I'm like, "Yeah, I'm pretty sure you are." Other than that, I just don't meet a lot of women that are virgins that are that young. So while I understand the premise of the question, I just don't know that there is a clear answer, because as far as I think it's important to find a woman who hasn't gone out and just sport fucked like 30 or 40 guys, because when you have that type of situation, the Institute for Family Studies survey, which showed that as women have more sexual partners, they tend to find a harder and harder time being happy in a marriage. So that's essentially what's going on. I think it's a blessing for women to be able to see a man, have sex with a man, and then attach to that man and want to be with him for a long time. I think when women have sex with so many men that they lose that ability, when they're just like, yeah, I can just fuck guys just like guys fuck women. That's not a blessing. That's extremely masculine. That's very unattractive. And it's not something that women should be bragging about. But yet when I listen to hip hop, that's all I hear women bragging about. You know what I'm saying? I can go because girls are players too. Like that's not something you should be bragging about. That's not cool. You know what I'm saying? That is not helping you in any way whatsoever.
So, Michael, I'm going to finish on this. I'm just give you my take on this. So, in different societies, right, in history, you mentioned the likes of Genghis Khan, and a large proportion of society can, especially in Asia, can trace their roots back to him. And these emperors that have come and gone, and it's not just emperors, it's been leaders, it's been kings, it's been a variety of different leaders, and not just the leaders, the warriors as well. They had multiple women, okay? And they were married to multiple women, or they just had multiple women. This was the way of all these different societies. And I believe that what we have today is we are experimenting. We are experimenting with everything in the West. We are not holding on to traditional norms. And I believe it is imperative that we hold on to cultural norms, because these to me, it's bizarre because, look, if you go to Africa, you go to Asia, right? These two continents are very historic continents with a deep-rooted history. The culture that has developed across Asia, right? Just to give you a bit of a perspective, right? I was actually looking at a real-world map. The top of Pakistan to the bottom of Pakistan is the same length, approximately, between the UK all the way up to Turkey, so the breadth of pretty much of Europe. So the land of Asia is massive, and it's historical. It's such a historical land. Whether you go to China all the way up to Japan, wherever you are in Asia, we've had so many empires come and go. Now these empires and these different cultures have developed cultural norms which have developed over thousands of years, right?
Yeah.
To sit now in 2023 and get them cultural norms, throw them in the bin, say we're changing the script entirely and we're going to try these new philosophies which have never been tried and never been tested, right? And because why would these cultural norms be developed in these continents over, and it's not just in Asia, right? It's across all of Asia, all of Africa. These cultural norms have existed for a reason, and I believe that the reasons for this are quite obvious, because when you tilt it on its head and you start forgetting the roles of men and women traditionally. I mean, okay, we live in 2023. I get that, right? And I believe we should develop. I believe there are areas we should develop, but there are certain societal norms which we should keep as well. And I believe that's being thrown in the bin, and that's what we're seeing in real time right now happening across the world. And that's why our societies are messing up as well, particularly over here in the West. And I believe that this war that's taking place with Russia and Ukraine, a component of that with the people, not necessarily the leadership, but I believe with the people, there is also a cultural norm war taking place there as well.
So in a situation with the norms, so we have to pick and choose, right? There's certain norms. Like I don't think, we need to stone people for infidelity, right?
Agreed.
Norms.
I'm not saying everything. I believe that's why I mentioned, right? We do need to develop in certain areas, but there are certain societal norms which have existed across different across history, across different societies, which were abandoned.
I think we have to find some middle ground between the two things. And part of the reason why is as we as a society increase our technology and get further and further away from the survival scenario, the idea of an egalitarian society becomes more and more appealing. Now, I don't necessarily agree with it. I'm a big, huge proponent of capitalism. But like one of the things that happens is as we can, when technology, things like antibiotics or even 3D printed homes or any sort of medical advancement or anything like that gets us further and further away from our hunter-gatherer roots, then we have the ability to argue over things like whether or not Elon Musk should have bought Twitter or whether or not, LeBron James is going to go play for the Dallas Mavericks. The reason why we can have these discussions is because we have 3 square meals, a roof over our head, and we don't have predators coming up and trying to kill us. We're not dying of disease. We generally live into our 80s. Most of us, our teeth have not fallen out. Most of the westernized world is like that. And so because we have this privilege, then we have all these, we can move further and further away from the idea of one man and one woman should stay together. And we think about 1850s in the United States. Let's go back into the 19th century, the Dust Bowl. There was a period of time where it was extremely hard. The agrarian society in the United States was having a very hard time surviving. And so men and women would have 12, 13, 14 children. They would stay together forever. That was a function of survival. Marriage and children was a function of survival. We've gotten further and further away from that, where now we have a woman who makes $300,000 a year, has breast implants, and carries a Glock. And she doesn't need a man. Like she wants a man, but she genuinely doesn't need one. And so that's her belief, is that she doesn't need one. And instead, so she goes through her life not trying to be the man that she wanted to marry. And instead, she ends up very unhappy because she chose, instead of choosing a traditional route, she chose to go out and get the bag and be a bad bitch. So that's the whole thing that's going on there. Is there a middle ground? There is. Can we get back to the middle ground? I don't know that we can, Sham, because other than like Afghanistan 2 years ago and Iran in 1979, I can't think of a society pushing back to the right. The Overton window shifts to the left. That's why, like, if you notice, moderate people, when they get older, look conservative. And the reason why is because as the Overton window shifts to the left, my views on the world, which what I consider to be pretty moderate, as the world got more liberal, I started to look more conservative. Does that make sense? And you'll find that another example of that would be like Joe Rogan. Like, people on the left consider him like a hardcore right-wing extremist. Like, he's not. He was a moderate who, as the world got more liberal, like, he may have believed in liberal causes, but once we got into the point where like 9-year-olds need to transition from a boy to a girl, he's like, that's crazy. Like, even for me as a liberal, that's crazy. So he starts to look conservative. Does that make sense? As the Overton windows keep shifting to the left, those of us who are moderate start to look more and more conservative because our beliefs, we believe to be more rational. What is right and what is wrong, I don't know. But the thing is, like, when you read the Singularity is Near by Ray Kurzweil, and you start talking about chips being implanted in people's heads and men having sex with robots and women being able to have children with other women by combining alleles of 2 females together, when you see some of these things that are possible in the future, I don't know that they're avoidable, especially with artificial intelligence. I don't know that any of these things are avoidable. So Rich Cooper and I agree on this one thing. We're going to enjoy the decline. I don't know that this is fixable. I have a program called Men of Action. Inside of Men of Action, I try to teach these guys a level of morality, integrity, and excellence that I want them to display in their own lives, and then with their later on their spouses and their family. That's what I want for them. That's also what I would want for my family and hopefully my friends in my cohort. For everyone else, though, man, I just, like, when you're saying, is the world going to burn? I'm trying to think the world is going to burn. I do. I just feel like there's no way to really push back in the other direction. I don't think the pendulum is ever going to swing back to the right. And so this is just kind of the world that we live in. As far as the traditional values, though, like, we can pick and choose, right? So you had traditional values in India in the 3rd century, and then Alexander the Great came on in there and he changed the traditional values, right? You had traditional values in Iraq before 2003 where women couldn't vote. And then the United States came in there and changed the traditional values. Now women can vote in that country. So traditional values are going to change based on, like, all kinds of cultural norms. And the cultural norms for someone who is a Christian is different from the cultural norms of someone who's a Muslim, different from someone who's a Buddhist, different from someone who's Jewish. So it's really hard to, like, isolate what these cultural norms are. That's why I love evolutionary psychology, because evolutionary psychology does not look for cultural norms. What evolutionary psychology looks for is genetic norms. Like, when you control for culture, what do all cultures have in common? Men cherish chastity in women more than women cherish it in men. Women tend to want men who are stronger and taller than those particular women. Women tend to like men with a certain shoulder to waist ratio. Men tend to like women with a certain hip to waist ratio. That 0.72 for women and 1.65 to 1 for men. These things that we see that go across cultures. So when you control for culture and environment, these things are left to heredity. These are genetic things that are passed on. So when we see those things that are passed on by genetics, we say, why are these things passed on by genetics? Things that existed before the Prophet Muhammad in the 5th century and before Jesus Christ in the 1st century, why did these things exist even before that? Why did men prefer chastity going back 50,000 years? We can look and find reasons why that is. Why do women prefer men? I've said this before, and I know this is an extreme example. I consider us to be hairless murder apes, and women choose men that look like they can conduct the most violence on their behalf. Which one of these men is willing to do the most violence to protect me and my children? Which one? And that's the one that they choose. In general, that's which one they choose. Now, that violence...
Sorry to cut you off, Michael, just there on that point. But Rich Cooper talks about this in the Unplugged Alpha. He talks about that in the animal kingdom. It takes place as well, right? Mm-hmm. With apes. But going back, I want to mention this as well. Alexander the Great, he burnt Persia to the ground. Right? Because he didn't like the lavish lifestyle and the silk that the women were wearing. He didn't like it. So he burnt the Persia to the ground. So I think on that, what we're seeing, and again, this just history doesn't repeat itself, but it mimics what's happened in history. We see the echoes, and we're seeing that today as well, where the people who control the world, right, that status quo, they are the ones that will set what the rules are and what the social norms are.
Sure. So maybe that is the social norm, right? The social norm is the conqueror.
Exactly. Whatever the conqueror. Exactly. Wherever the conqueror says, we'll go. Wherever the conqueror says the history is, that's what history is. That is what it's going to be in the history books.
So I'm curious. I'm curious.
The norms are going to be as well. Yeah, go on.
Something you said before. You said that we're social norms between Russia and Ukraine. What were you talking about there?
I was saying that I think there is a battle going on between Russia and Ukraine on the higher level, where you've got the political issues and with Putin and so forth. But I believe that there's also a war going on there between the cultural dynamics, and I think that there is a mix between Russia and Ukraine. Now, I don't know a lot of Russian and Ukrainians to be able to vouch for this, but the few that I have spoken to have very differing beliefs. So within Russia and within Ukraine, and I think you see a similar dynamic in Turkey and Greece as well. There is a push there where some people, okay, let's go to Turkey as an example here. I know you asked about Russia and Ukraine, but Turkey as an example, right? So we've seen this election win by Erdogan, but there is a push for the more Islamic traditional values in Turkey. I've been to Turkey multiple times. So you have a contingent of people who want that, but then you have the other group of people who want to align more with the European values. And we are seeing this, I believe, in a similar fashion with Ukraine and Russia.
Sure. I mean, I can see that. I tend to be a bit more nihilist when it comes to this. I think Russia is only doing this for oil. I don't think they give a fuck about anyone's values.
I'm not talking about the political. We know, right? The political political reasons are separate. I'm talking about the people.
Yeah, no, it's an interesting thing. But I mean, the thing is, a lot of Ukrainians don't speak Russian, and the further west you go in that country, you see a lot of different culture, and those cultures break away. I mean, you could say, there's. It's an interesting argument. I haven't actually heard that argument before, but yes, I definitely, the western part of Ukraine falls more into European values. That's why they were exploring the idea of joining NATO. And the eastern part, in the Donbass region, those people speak Russian, but they don't speak Russian because, for normal reasons. They speak Russian because Joseph Stalin starved out everybody in that part of the world and then put ethnic Russians in that place. So that's the reason why there's so many Russian speakers in that part of the world. So yeah, I mean, it's an interesting, but no, I think that war's completely over oil. I don't think it's even 1% anything. As soon as I heard Vladimir Putin start talking about the Nazis had taken over Ukraine, I was like, okay, we've jumped the ship here.
I have my own opinions on the Russian-Ukraine war on the higher political level. I was talking more about the people and that side of it.
No,
Michael, tell me a bit. We've been talking about all these macro topics, right?
Yeah.
And societal topics. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? Tell us about your history, and before we clock off on this podcast, I want you to give a bit of a detailed dive about Michael Sartain, who he is, how was things growing up, and what's led you to your success and rise.
Yeah, I had a couple of unique things growing up. Obviously, my father being of British ancestry and my mother being Colombian, growing up in East Dallas, which is an ethnically mixed neighborhood. But I went to high school in a really, really bad neighborhood. So the place I grew up was actually in a pretty nice neighborhood. I went to high school south of there, which was a pretty rough neighborhood in Dallas. Most people who have any kind of wealth would not send their children to a DISD school, Dallas Independent School District. I don't think my parents were aware of how bad things got, because I went to high school during the crack epidemic. If you know, the Iran-Contra affair, where the United States was allowing crack cocaine to just come into the country unfiltered. That's essentially when I went to high school, and there was a massive crime epidemic. And it's also the time where gangster rap got started in the United States, the late 80s, early 90s. That's when it got started. That's when I went to high school. So when you deal with that whole situation, that whole thing is going on at that period of time. And when that happens, you come to a situation where I'm going to high school in a pretty rough neighborhood. I end up going to college. And when I get out of college, I couldn't find a job because I got out of college during the crash of MCI WorldCom and Enron. And so I couldn't find a job. I ended up working at a strip club for a while. It was just going to be a temporary thing. I ended up working there for 4 years. I watched 9/11 happen in the strip club, which caused me to end up joining the U.S. military. So I end up in this situation where I go to high school. I live in an affluent neighborhood. I go to high school in a poor neighborhood. I end up going to a pretty good college. I end up getting a degree in business and in physics and astrophysics. And then when I get out, I studied astrophysics. When I get out, I end up going and working at a gentleman's club. So a lot of the red pill beliefs I got, this is probably 2000, 2004, those things happened during that time period. I end up joining the military, and in the military for 7 years, especially as an aviator, you get to see the difference between bad leadership and good leadership. So this is where kind of my study of leadership came, and understanding how to lead men and talk in a non-passive aggressive way. in order to take critical feedback and to give critical feedback. I learned all these lessons while I was in the military. I get out and you end up moving to Las Vegas, and it's completely the opposite. Here in Las Vegas, I'm surrounded by people who are not accountable to anything. They do crazy stuff, but I really like being around pretty girls. So I enjoyed this lifestyle. So I moved out here. And so I was exposed to all these different elements, and I put them all together. Like the last 25 years of my life, I put it together in my MOA mentoring course. And I teach leadership, networking. I teach so high status social networking. I teach entrepreneurship. I teach evolutionary psychology, a winning mindset, critical thinking, and all these different aspects. We even go into finance in my course. It's 114 modules, and it's about 2,000 hours of content. And that's what I'm doing. I basically delineated everything from my past, and I put it into this one program. This is basically, if I could go back in time 25 years and say, Michael, these are the things that, in order for you to skip ahead, these are the things that you're going to learn over the next 25 years. And I would have put it in one course. That's exactly the course that I ended up making. And it is basically all these things that I learned from my past.
Can you tell us, you mentioned there that you were in the military.
Uh-huh.
Could you tell us some of the lessons that you learned from the military that has had an impact on you over the long run?
Yeah, so let's go over one of the required readings in the U.S. Marine Corps. I was in the Air Force, but in the Marine Corps, you have to read this book called Gates of Fire, and it's about the Battle of Thermopylae in 483 BC between Xerxes the First and King Leonidas of Sparta. And one of the things they go over in the book is that whenever something needed to be done, King Leonidas would do the thing first. So if someone needed to pitch a tent, King Leonidas had a hammer in his hand. And if someone needed to go to battle, he was at first to go to battle. King Xerxes, on the other hand, had an army basically filled with slaves, and they were just sort of doing his bidding. And so they show these two types of leadership. I literally saw it firsthand. Where I had one squadron commander. She wanted to pass the buck on to everyone else. It was everyone else's fault. It was never her fault, anything that she was doing. And she got fired as a commander. Then I had another commander. She took responsibility for everything, and she was an incredible pilot at the same time. A lot of commanders become shitty pilots after a while. When you're a squadron commander, you don't get to fly that much. But she was a proficient pilot, and she was a good leader. So these are things I learned over time whenever we'd have good commanders and we'd have bad commanders, and seeing the difference between the two, and then also the scarcity of having good commanders. This is another thing, Sham. I lead a sales team with my program. When we have good salespeople, they're so rare that you have to promote them. And when you promote them, they don't get to do as much sales because they're now a manager. And you end up in this thing where you're always looking for quality individuals. As a leader, you also need to learn how to get the best out of your people. And you get the best out of your people by giving constructive feedback, but also taking as much responsibility as you can on yourself so that they know that they have top cover and that they know that you're going to give them the support that they want. I try to be the leader that I always looked up to when I was in the U.S. military. I had a Colonel Robinson, who was one of my last squadron commander in the 19th Air Refueling Group. And I was like, I remember him always taking responsibility, never feeling afraid to go up and talk to him, always feeling like if I had to go into Colonel Robinson's office and tell him about a problem we were having, I never worried I was going to get stood up in the back of the room and get fucking yelled at. I knew that Colonel Robinson could accept critical criticism. The other thing I saw when I was in the military, this is a big one. Whenever we'd have a 4-star general come visit the unit, everything was sweeped up. All the bullshit was put into the closet. Everyone had their uniforms pressed. And I started to realize, I was like, man, this general has no idea what's going on in the Air Force. Because everywhere he goes, everything is spick and span and shiny. They're polishing a turd. Anything that's going wrong, he's never going to see it because everything's hid from him because he's a 4-star general. In my company, Men of Action, I never want to be that person. I want people, the emperor has no clothes. I want people to always tell me where I'm fucking up. Always. Michael, you talk too much about this. I just had my guys the other day. So I want Men of Action is mainly a networking course, but I kind of want to get a little bit more into the business building aspect of it. And my sales guys are like, listen, when you do that, you're kind of going off message and it's making it harder for us to sell your program. So we want you to stay on message all the time. So I get feedback from my sales guy that I've just only been working for us for 3 or 4 months is giving me this feedback. My partners are like, yeah, we agree. And it's actually changed our narrative because of that. We accept feedback from anyone in the company. Everyone's feedback is accepted. It's welcome. Now, we don't always listen to it. We don't always take it into account and then change our methods, but we often do. I want to be the leader that can accept constructive criticism, give constructive criticism without making things personal. And I always understand that things are my fault. Like the book Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willink. Even if something's not my fault, I make it my fault because no one else is going to come and save me. No one else is going to fix the problem because of me. My dad's not here anymore. He passed away in 2006. No, my dad's not going to bail me out of something if something goes wrong with this company. I'm the only one who can do that. And having really good leaders around me who can be open and honest and willing to criticize me and tell me when to shut the fuck up or tell me when I'm wrong. Or also my partners admit when I'm right and I admit when they're right. That's something else that we've been able to do. I'm very, very lucky with that. But here's another thing, Sham. This is going to seem really strange, but my two partners and I, when we started this company, we had both been scammed. Well, the three of us had been scammed. We had basically been almost completely robbed by a previous partner that we had. We were running a business, and in running this business, we kept getting gaslit by one of our other partners. This guy kept lying to us. He kept taking money for different things like advertisement and our commissions and spending it on bullshit. So that when we finally got out from underneath this dude, we were like pit bulls, like racing to meet. Like we were so hungry and ready to do things in the right direction that the company went from 100K to 400K. Now we're doing about 600K a month in revenue. Right out the gate. Why? Because we had actually been held back, and we had like a common. We have some very strict rules in Men of Action. Number one, no one touches commissions. Number two, if anyone touches commissions, they're fired. And number two, everyone always gets paid on time. If you're an affiliate of ours or if you're one of our coaches, you get paid on time every time. No one ever has to dispute any of their payment. If you go look at other some of these other programs, their coaches get ripped off. Often these guys will like offer boot camps and never fulfill their boot camps. You will never, ever see that in our program. Our program is built on integrity because of my experience with previous programs and because of my experience in the U.S. military. You're not going to find another program that has more integrity than mine. And that's the reason why we've been able to basically quadruple every 6 months.
Amazing, Michael. Amazing. I think, I have a lot of respect for people who have been in the military. I read a book a while ago, How to Make Your Bed. It's had a profound impact on my life because making your bed, the discipline from making your bed translates to everything in your life.
It does.
And, the concept of extreme ownership from Jocko Willink is something I've also adhered to. So I have a lot of respect for you. I have a lot of respect for anyone who goes into the military. It teaches you discipline and it teaches you life lessons which you can carry forward. Michael, is there anything else that you want to share with our viewers before we clock off today? Because I've had a long day. Yeah. This is the second podcast I've done today. My voice is getting a little bit hoarse. I'm getting a bit tired. I'm looking forward to my bed. Is there anything else you want to drop before we clock off today?
It's funny. We just woke up. We went to see Deadmau5 last night till 4:00 in the morning. We just woke up right now.
What time is it where you guys are right now?
It's 3:26 p.m. We woke up probably around 11, and then I had a couple of calls, and then I'm going to do this. And the girls, hey guys, you want to come say hi to everyone in London? Everyone in Leeds. These guys are in Leeds.
We've got a lot of US viewers, a lot of UK viewers. Hey guys, how you doing?
They're here. They're going to the pool right now. They're the pool downstairs in my unit. But yeah, it's 3:26.
Living life, Michael. You're living life, man. I need to join you, Michael.
You need to come out here. Hey, bikini come to. Oh, sorry. Here we go. There's going on.
Bye.
So yes. So going back to what I said before, one of the things I would recommend is that everyone who's watching this, if you guys, there's no excuse. You guys can all join our free school server. If you guys hit me up on Instagram, just look up Michael Sartain. I will put you in our free school server. One of the first things that we try to do in our program is help you guys fix your social profile. So that's everything from LinkedIn, Twitter, Bumble, Hinge, mainly Instagram. We help you fix that, and we give you 30 perfectly curated Instagrams to copy off of and to try to fix. That is on our free school server. Is also all the books that I mentioned during this podcast are in our book list on the free school server. And the first 4 steps of Men of Action, they're also in a free course that we have on the free school server. It's open to everyone. If you guys just message me on Instagram, I'll give you access to that. And we'd love to have you come on that. Also, there's a calendar. So for instance, when this episode comes out, this episode is going to go on our calendar, and I'm going to let everybody see it who's on the free school server. There's a little over 1,000 guys on the free side. And then if you join Men of Action, you go into the paid school server that actually has access to more stuff, including the program, which is in the protocol, this Men of Action and Men of Action Advanced. Both of those protocols are in there, and you guys can get access to that. So if you guys want to, find out more about what I'm doing, go find me on Instagram. And when you find me on Instagram, I will give you access to our free school server, and you will be in there for days checking out all the free stuff that we have on.
You know what, Michael? I've spoken to a lot of people, right? And I'll tell you something, if people take your course and they can even speak 50% as good as you do, with the speed, the eloquence that you do, they may become the next Jordan Belfort. So
I love Jordan.
Yeah, man.
Jordan's great. That's one of the required books. Way of the Wolf is one of the required books in my course.
Yeah, I've read it. Fantastic book.
Yeah.
Straight line technique.
Yeah.
Right. Thank you very
Awesome,
much,
man.
Michael.
All right, man. Talk to you guys soon.